Hey everyone, it's me, Devyn Michaels. Come say hi.
Anything unique about the body?
I think initially, obviously, that it was decapitated.
On August 8, 2023, the sun rises over a quiet Henderson neighborhood. But inside one home, a mother is about to make a discovery that will haunt her forever. Yoko Willette enters her son's room and immediately senses that something was horrifically wrong. She finds him wrapped in a bloody blanket, and her 46-year-old son, Johnathan Willette, died as a result of extreme violence. His head, gone, and the crime weapon, never found. But the real twist in this case isn't just about the gruesome nature of this crime. It's about the tangled web of relationships that led to this moment. A web involving a former adult film actress, a father, and his son. A twisted love triangle that ended in decapitation, betrayal, and a courtroom battle where the defendant threw away a plea deal, declaring her innocence, only to be convicted anyway. To understand how this case became one of the most shocking crime trials in recent Nevada history, we need to go back to where it all began. And trust me, the relationships here are as complicated as they are disturbing. Devyn Michaels, a former adult film actress who also worked as a realtor and went by the stage names Nikki Fairchild and Tracy Tavares, met Johnathan Willette in 2012. The two began a relationship and married that same year. For 6 years, they appeared to build a life together, having 2 daughters during their marriage. But by 2018, the marriage had ended and Devyn and Johnathan divorced. Johnathan was awarded full physical custody of their 2 young daughters, and that decision would later become one of the central points to everything that followed. Johnathan's custody of the girls wasn't by chance. It was the result of growing concerns about Devyn's behavior towards the children. In October of 2022, Las Vegas police arrested Devyn on a child abuse or neglect charge after a worker at a child care facility reported bruises on the leg of one of her daughters, who was just 8 years old at the time. Following that arrest, the children were placed in the care of Johnathan and his mother, where he lived from November 2022 through May of 2023. During that entire period, Johnathan retained full physical custody, even though the children later spent periods of time staying with Devyn Michaels. The child abuse case itself moved slowly through the court system. Even after their divorce and the child abuse allegations, Devyn and Jonathan's relationship didn't end there. They remained entangled in what witnesses would later describe as an off-again, on-again arrangement. During the trial, testimony revealed the disturbing nature of their post-divorce dynamic. Devyn herself described it as transactional. She had sex with Johnathan while he paid the bills and maintained custody of their children. But here's where things take a truly bizarre turn. Johnathan Willette had a son from a previous relationship, and his name was Devyn Willette. When Devyn married Johnathan in 2012, she became Devyn's stepmother, who was just a teenager at the time. What happened next would shock even the most seasoned trial observers. At 19 years old, Devyn Willette began a sexual relationship with his stepmother, Devyn Michaels. The woman who had been married to his father was now sleeping with him. During testimony at trial, Devyn, now 29, admitted to the jury that the affair began when he was just 19 and had recently lost his virginity. Prosecutors would later argue that Devyn Michaels groomed and manipulated the young man. This is a woman in her late 30s who decided to begin a sexual relationship with her 19-year-old stepson, who had just lost his virginity, the attorney told the jury during closing arguments. The relationship wasn't just a fling. In 2021, Devyn Michaels and Devyn Willette got married. She wore a white wedding dress and veil. He wore a suit, and they exchanged rings. It looked like a traditional ceremony, but the bride was the groom's former stepmother. During the trial, both Devyn and Devyn initially claimed the marriage was purely for convenience and insurance purposes. But when the defense presented intimate photos and messages between the pair dating back to 2016, the truth became clear. This was far more than a marriage of convenience. In the days before the crime, tensions were running high. Johnathan Willette had custody of his 2 daughters with Devyn. He was planning to move into Devyn's northwest Las Vegas home where she lived with Devyn, allegedly to keep the family together for the sake of the children. Prosecutors argued that despite outwardly agreeing to the plan, Devyn Michaels never truly wanted Johnathan to move back in with her. Allowing him into the home would have disrupted the life she had built with her new husband, Devyn, a life she was determined to protect. The walls were closing in on that carefully constructed reality. She wanted her daughters back. She wanted control. And according to prosecutors, Johnathan was the one person standing in the way of both. Meanwhile, her relationship with Devyn was deteriorating. Text messages shown in court reveal that just days before the crime, Devyn had messaged Devyn calling him a liar and a cheater, demanding a divorce. At the same time, she was in a precarious position with Johnathan. She described to detectives that she would do anything to keep him happy because he had custody of their daughters, and she desperately wanted to remain in their lives. But on the night of August 6, 2023, something snapped. Johnathan was staying at his mother's Henderson home as he prepared for his move to Devyn's house. On the evening of August 6, Devyn visited the house. Johnathan Willette, Johnathan's mother, testified through a Japanese translator, telling the jury she saw Devyn Michaels, whom she knew as Nikki, with her son around 10 p.m. that night. And then she saw Michaels again around 1 a.m. Then, in the middle of the night, Yoko heard something. She described it as some strange noise like a bang, something like that. What happened in that bedroom would be pieced together through Michaels' own confessions to police. In video interviews played for the jury, Devyn told detectives that she was giving Johnathan a back massage in his bedroom when something happened. I hit him with something, she said, describing the object as candlestick-like. The detective asked, "Did you ask anything before you hit him?" "No," she replied. He didn't say anything and he stopped moving. But the horror didn't end there. What Devyn did next would elevate this from a crime case to something far more sinister. She later dismembered him in an attempt to conceal the crime. The medical examiner testified that the removal of Johnathan Willette's head occurred after his death. He explained to the jury that the injuries showed multiple attempts were made before the removal was completed, suggesting the person responsible tried more than one method and used multiple tools before succeeding. Then came the chemicals. Prosecutors believe Michaels poured chemicals over Johnathan's body, likely in an attempt to destroy evidence. And the head? According to testimony from Henderson police, Devyn Michaels told him exactly what she did with it. In an interview that wasn't shown to the jury due to legal technicalities, Devyn Michaels told the detective that she placed Johnathan's remains in a laundry basket, drove it to her northwest Las Vegas home, and threw it in a trash bin in her neighborhood. During that same interview, Devyn noted a garbage truck drove past the location. According to the detective, Devyn made a comment indicating that Johnathan's remains had already been thrown away. The head was never recovered, and investigators believe it was collected during routine trash service and taken to a landfill. Phone records and GPS data told the rest of the story. A detective testified that data showed Johnathan's phone traveling with Devyn's phone from the Henderson home to her Las Vegas residence around 2:45 a.m. Devyn's own children later found Johnathan's cracked, bloodied phone in their mother's driveway and turned it over to the police. The crime weapon, like the head, was never found. At 8 a.m. on August 8th, Johnathan Willette went to check on her son, but what she found would traumatize her forever. Her son's own body had been violently altered and wrapped in blankets, with a critical part of him missing. She immediately called 911. When Henderson police arrived and began processing the scene, they found no head and chemicals poured all over the victim's body. But they did find something crucial, a trail of evidence that led straight to Devyn Michaels. Henderson police visited Devyn's home the afternoon after Johnathan's body was discovered, and what they found was damning. Among the evidence already in police custody was Johnathan's bloodied phone, which had been recovered from Devyn's driveway. Inside the home, investigators also found Johnathan's wallet, ID, car keys, and social security card, hidden inside a plastic bag in Devyn's underwear drawer. Crime scene analysts also photographed two swords on Devyn's living room floor. Oddly enough, police never tested them as potential crime weapons. Perhaps most telling, investigators found a Ring camera system that had been in Johnathan's mother's home had recently been removed. The uninstalled system was photographed in Devyn's garage, but there was no footage on it, and detectives interviewed Devyn Michaels 6 times, both before and after her arrest. During her interviews with police, Devyn's story changed multiple times. When confronted about blood on Johnathan's phone, She claimed he had cut his hand on a table while moving furniture, but the autopsy showed no such injury, and crime scene analysts found no blood on the table she referenced. When asked about Johnathan's belongings in her home, she initially denied having anything of his, yet his social security card was in her possession. At one point, detectives asked Devyn if it was possible she had caused the death of Johnathan and just didn't remember, and her chilling response, "That's very possible." On August 15, 2023, 1 week after the crime, Devyn Michaels was arrested and charged with murder, but the case was far from over. In 2024, facing a potential first-degree crime conviction that could send her to prison for life, Devyn Michaels accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon. The terms? She will be eligible for parole after serving just 15 years in prison. It was a deal many legal experts considered generous, given the brutality of the crime. The judge accepted the plea and deemed it entered, voluntarily, knowingly, and intelligently. All that remained was the sentencing hearing in July of 2025, but that's when everything changed. What was supposed to be a routine sentencing hearing, Devyn Michaels stood before Judge Jones and made a shocking declaration.
And I keep listening to the people because they keep saying, this is the best advice. It doesn't turn out the way they tell me it will.
Judge, I'm not comfortable with this record. I'm willing to let her out of her plea if the court is inclined.
I don't know how to face this.
All right. It's just, this wouldn't be appropriate.
I completely understand.
Let's go to trial.
All right, well, I need you to understand what I'm saying to you and answer my question. Yes. Do you want to withdraw your plea and go to trial? Yes, please. All right, this plea is going to be withdrawn.
So, the plea deal was off, and the case was headed to trial. In November 2025, the trial for the murder of Johnathan Willette began. The proceedings would be sensational, bizarre, and deeply disturbing. The district attorney opened with a warning to the jury. Buckle up, because you're in for a wild ride. He showed them crime scene photos of Jonathan's body as he outlined the prosecution's theory, which was Devyn Michaels caused the death of Johnathan to eliminate him from the complicated equation of her life. She wanted to keep her daughters and continue her relationship with Devyn without the complication of Johnathan moving in. The walls were closing in on Devyn and the fantasy she had put together, he told the jury. But the defense had a different story entirely. The defense attorney for Devyn made a bold claim that she didn't take the life of Johnathan Willette, but instead, it was his own son. The defense pointed to Devyn Willette's motive, a young man in his first serious relationship, facing the prospect of his father moving in and displacing him. A father who, according to Devyn's own testimony, was never really there for him. When we talk about motive, would actually drive someone to commit a crime, the defense asked the jury, isn't it the passion of a young man facing the end of his first serious relationship? A relationship threatened by his father moving into the home? The defense noted that Devyn worked as a home security technician and had access to power saws, the same kind of tool that can be used in the removal of body parts. And the defense asked the jury to consider, if Devyn was so sophisticated and cunning about covering up the crime, why would she carelessly drop Jonathan's phone in her own driveway? Look at the motivations and find her not guilty, he urged. But prosecutors had an answer ready. On November 7, 2025, Devyn Willette took the stand. The 29-year-old faced uncomfortable questions about his relationship with his stepmother turned wife and denied any involvement in his father's death. The attorney asked him outright if he was involved in his father's murder, and Devyn answered firmly with a no. Prosecutors presented phone records showing that no cell phone or video evidence placed Devyn at the crime scene the night of the crime. Meanwhile, GPS data clearly showed Devyn's phone traveling from Henderson to her Las Vegas home with Jonathan's phone at the exact time the crime occurred. Devyn testified that he had recently told his father about his marriage to Devyn before the crime. He admitted the relationship began when he was just 19. He told the jury he hadn't spoken to Devyn since a brief jail phone call hours after the arrest, and that he wished he had divorced her. The defense tried to poke holes in his credibility, but the damage was already done. Over 2 weeks, the jury heard testimony from forensic experts, detectives, and family members, and the evidence was overwhelming. Devyn Michaels' own confession that she hit Johnathan and he stopped moving, her admission to detectives about disposing of the head in the trash, GPS data placing her at the crime scene and tracking her movements afterward, Johnathan's belongings hidden in her dresser drawer, his bloodied phone in her driveway, the removed ring camera that could have captured evidence. Johnathan's droplet of blood being on the phone convicts the defendant even without her confession, the attorney argued in closing arguments. The prosecutor painted a picture of a master manipulator who groomed a teenage boy, caused the death of her ex to maintain control, and then tried to frame the same boy for the crime. Devyn is a master manipulator, and that is shown through the evidence the prosecutor told the jury. And on November 15, 2025, the jury began deliberations. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict: guilty, first-degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon. The defense attorney later revealed that jurors told attorneys they had doubts until they learned of Devyn's detailed confession. Anytime there's a confession, it's a difficult case to defend, he admitted. Devyn Michaels, the woman who had thrown away a 15-year plea deal, claiming she could prove her innocence, had instead been convicted of an even more serious crime. Now she faced the harshest punishment possible. On January 8, 2026, Devyn Michaels stood before the judge for sentencing. Johnathan's father, James Willette, also known as JC, delivered an emotional victim impact statement. He requested life in prison without the possibility of parole. The district attorney argued that despite Devyn's lack of prior criminal history, the extreme violence of the crime warranted the maximum sentence. However, the defense for Devyn made a final plea for leniency, arguing the crime was a single impulsive act followed by poor decisions. He asked the judge to consider redemption and impose only the minimum of 20 years. Judge Jones sentenced Devyn Michaels to 20 years to life in prison for first-degree murder, plus a consecutive sentence of 8 to 20 years for the use of a deadly weapon, totaling 28 years to life. With credit for time served, Devyn Michaels will not be eligible for parole until she has served 28 years, and she will be around 70 years old. The sentence was nearly double what she had received under the plea deal she threw away. After the sentencing, James Willette, Johnathan's dad, told reporters he was satisfied with the outcome. Justice was served for all, he said. But when you step back from the timeline, when you look past the decapitation, the confession, and the sensational trial, you start to see a pattern, a behavioral blueprint that tragically appears in many cases involving custody disputes and toxic relationships. Prosecutors argued that Devyn's motive was rooted in control, specifically her loss of it. Johnathan had full custody of their daughters after the child abuse case. She had been sentenced to probation, and her access to her children was limited. In her own words to detectives, she admitted she needed a way out because of the custody issue. This is a classic indicator of what psychologists call instrumental violence. Violence used as a means to achieve a specific goal. To her, she was eliminating an obstacle. The relationship between Devyn Michaels and Devyn Willette raises serious questions about power dynamics and manipulation. She met him when he was a teenager and she was his stepmother. At 19 years old, fresh from losing his virginity, he began a sexual relationship with a woman in her late 30s who had been married to his own father. Prosecutors called her a master manipulator, and the evidence supports this. She groomed a vulnerable young man, married him, and then when the situation became inconvenient, allegedly tried to frame him for his own father's murder. During trial, Devyn testified about trying to fill his father's shoes. This language suggests deep psychological confusion and trauma, exactly the kind of vulnerability a manipulator exploits. Forensic psychologists often note that post-mortem mutilation can indicate several things: an attempt to conceal identity, to dispose of evidence, or in some cases, deep rage toward the victim. In this case, it seems that the removal of his head appears to have been functional rather than rage-driven. Devyn needed to dispose of Johnathan's body in a way that gave her time and distance. The head went into the trash and the body was left behind, covered in chemicals. But the attempt at multiple cutting methods, multiple tools, suggests desperation. This wasn't practiced or planned and detailed. It was frantic problem-solving after an impulsive act of violence. Perhaps the most psychologically revealing moment in this case was when Devyn Michaels withdrew her plea deal. She had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Yet she stood in court and declared she could prove her innocence. This suggests a profound disconnect from reality, possibly rooted in narcissism. Despite overwhelming evidence, her own confession, GPS data, physical evidence, she still believes she can convince a jury otherwise. It's a pattern seen in high-profile defendants, an inability to accept responsibility, a belief that they can manipulate their way out of consequences, and ultimately, a catastrophic miscalculation. In the end, Devyn Michaels' psychology tells the story of someone who believed she was smarter than everyone else, more entitled to what she wanted, and was justified in whatever means it took to get it. To this day, Johnathan Willette's head has never been recovered. The crime weapon remains missing, and the swords found in Devyn's home were never tested. Jonathan's 2 young daughters are being raised by his father and stepmother, who had never met their grandchildren or Devyn before this crime. Johnathan's stepmother spoke at the sentencing. "We cannot bring Johnathan back. God has gained an angel in heaven, and we believe he is watching over us and the girls." And Devyn Michaels, the woman who insisted she could prove her innocence, she'll spend the next 3 decades behind bars, quite possibly the rest of her life, convicted of one of Nevada's most horrific murders. This case isn't just about a brutal crime. It's about the devastating consequences of manipulation, toxic relationships, and the dangerous combination of desperation and entitlement. Johnathan Willette was a father who fought for custody of his daughters. He was trying to provide stability for them, to keep his family together in whichever way he could. And for that, he lost his life in the most horrific way imaginable. Devyn Willette was groomed as a teenager, manipulated into a relationship that should have never happened, then left to testify in court about the crime of his own father, while his wife, his former stepmother, sat just feet away. And 2 young girls, now under the care of grandparents they had never met before, will grow up knowing that their mother caused the death of their father. That is a trauma that will follow them for the rest of their lives. This case also reminds us of something important. The justice system, for all of its flaws, it worked. The evidence was followed, the truth came out, and Devyn Michaels will spend her time exactly where she belongs, in prison. If this case teaches us anything, it's that custody battles, toxic relationships, and desperation can become deadly. It's that manipulation leaves scars that last generations. And it's that some people will do anything, even the unthinkable, to maintain control. Thank you so much for watching today's case. And cases like this reminds us how quickly control, secrecy, and desperation can turn destructive when left unchecked. So let's always try to keep an eye out for each other and to be there for one another. So until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and stay curious. Bye.